we have this? Do we have the slides up? Oh, okay. Perfect. So this next section was actually supposed to be presented by Professor Anil Gaba, but as you saw, due to an unpredictable statistical event, he's not able to join us today. So it's a presentation of what our class has been up to since December 2020, starting out with the major life events. So, press.
I am. Oh, next slide.
Next slide. Yeah. All right. So 40 of us got married. 30 met the love of their lives. 18 had kids. 9, unfortunately, separated. But that's new beginnings. 1 successfully avoided depression. Just shows you how much compassion we need in our lives. Moving on. Congratulating all those that got engaged and married, from Lebanon to France to South Africa. Congrats to our newlyweds and those that got engaged. Looks. Some engagements were closer, some further afield. Let's give them a warm round of applause. And a pause for an even major life event. It seems somebody has won the lottery.
Or become a millionaire.
Or become a millionaire.
Definitely not from his consulting career.
So, if this is true, ladies and gentlemen, if you find Utsav...
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, get his bank card. Don't talk to him. Yeah. Now, back to the major life events and the babies. I see our classmates have been busy. So, especially in Brazil, João, well done. And not forgetting Teo, who is single-handedly increasing our percentage with the twins. Thank you, Teo. In terms of career progress and transitions, we have 2 people that have retired early. I assume this is Utsav again, because it can't be anyone else. And the choice of weekend activities, INSEAD representing again, 34% drank, 21% drank and traveled, over 50% drinking. So disappointing, guys, so disappointing. And then the parties that never happened, including the recent reunions in London.
Or just casual weekends.
Or just casual weekends. And then a slide about self-care. Only 27.055702918% are cutting their hair. First of all, for a statistics professor, I think we need better significant figures. But second of all, that's a low percentage.
Okay.
Now on to COVID, 20D's favorite topic. We have 177 that have had their 3rd or 4th jab, 119 that caught Omicron, 40 that caught Delta. Guys, we need to keep up. And those of us getting jabs. And finally, cool life challenges. We have one person that attended a rave in Riyadh and has lived to tell the tale.
She definitely wants to tell you. It was the first thing she wanted to tell me.
Then we have the new hobbies. And we have Kwame here contemplating the difference between ballet and consulting.
I'd just like to see him in a tutu.
Yeah, that's going to be a pretty picture. Then, next up, we have the beautiful face of Freddie Mercury himself at INSEAD, minus the gray hair.
Good thing he left INSEAD with 2 partners before he got this.
And some of our teammates have picked up new hobbies, some dangerous, others fun, I think. And then seeing the world, traveling, as usual, INSEAD. There's a group of people we need to thank for all the trips, all the organizations. Akash, Nivi, Joanna, Mona, thank you for everything that you organized. And thank you to everyone for sharing your life endeavors with us.
So we've been allocated a little bit extra time and you managed to manage it very well. And I just wanted to know if there's anyone from the audience who'd like to join us in sharing anything about their year or any fun stories they may have. Oh, I see someone getting up there. Is it Peter? Come to the stage, Peter. We should go down.
So this is a little bit impromptu, I have to say. As you know, illnesses do crop up. We do have to make split decisions. We were very well prepared for that, right? It was a year of uncertainty, but it was a year of action. I think maybe I tried to encapsulate like what I'd seen in the INSEAD year. And I always found, as my brother who's sitting back there in the audience once told me, the best way to understand that is through stories. Stories come from the heart. Stories come from history. Stories are often not true. But I think I'll talk about a story that I think is quite relevant in this day and age, about tragedy, about perseverance. And actually, it's fairly relevant to where we are now here. I, as a Kenyan American, don't know much French history, but a good friend told me that this one was fairly accurate. It starts actually at the beginning of a summer very similar to this. 100, 300 years ago, who really knows? And it starts, unfortunately, with a death. We all know Notre Dame, of course. We all know that the tragedy that has fallen is something historic, is something that has changed the face of Paris before. But if we go back in history, we'll talk about another tragedy that changed the city, changed the people, tore them apart, and brought them back together. And that was the death of Quasimodo, the hunchback of Notre Dame. On a day similar like this, Quasimodo sat in the bell tower, swinging his giant mallet as he would, pulling the massive ropes as he would, making song for the people of Paris, reminding them of the beauty of life, reminding them of the opportunities before them. The people of Paris looked to Notre Dame as their beacon of hope, their beacon of truth, the beacon of life beyond what they saw to their shoulders, as they looked to their neighbors, as they looked at their plates and all they had, what little they had. And the bell tower acted as a symbol for the people of Paris to turn to. And so when that one day Quasimodo did not ring those bells, the people of Paris, they didn't know what to do. Where was this resounding symbol, this resounding sound that came again and again, multiple times a day, day after day after day, telling them that the world was good, telling them that there was more to life than what they saw on their plates with so little. And for the people of Paris, it was tragedy. It was silence. There was nothing for them. And for the Archbishop of Notre Dame, it was horror. How could he bring a people, a city together, a nation together, without having some symbol for them to turn to, without having anything to bring the people together? And as he saw, without having the opportunity to save those around him. And so what do you do? What do you do when your symbol, your beacon is gone? Well, you search for another, of course. And so the Archbishop assembled the cardinals. They brought them all together from across the city, from across the country, from across the lands, to find someone who could sing that sweet, sweet bell, to ring it in such a way that the people of Paris, the people of France, even the people of Europe would have hope again on a blazing hot day. Much like this, he assembled and sent out the call. The cardinals came, and the people came. The city of Paris grew hopeful as the lines wove round and round Notre Dame, across the Seine. People prepared to help bring hope to their city, to their people, to their world. And they did. One individual after the other walked through those massive oaken doors of Notre Dame, shared their respects with the Archbishop, with the cardinals, and then marched, some very self-assuredly, up those stairs, round and round and round, to the top of the bell tower. Round and round and round they went, climbing to the top, to help the people of Paris find hope. And this was no ordinary summer. There was plague this summer. There was heat this summer. As Paris went through some of the worst days it had, as the nation went through their own struggles, the people in the streets waited and looked hopefully at this bell tower that would remind them that there's a life beyond what they know, beyond the meager portions on their plate. And so the cardinals, with great expectation, would watch as one individual after another, burly individual, would heft the giant mallet and slam it against the bell tower, only to elicit a small dong. And the Archbishop looks over his shoulder, he looks at the cardinals and says, "What do we do in this situation? This is not hope. This is pity. This is us telling the people of Paris, give up. This is us telling the people of Paris, go home." And so they tried again and again. As the line stretched, people baking in the sun, sweat pouring down, individuals collapsing in the streets as they waited for their opportunity to bring hope to the world. They came day after day after day. The swing of the mallet, the pull of the ropes, the dong. The summer grew hotter, the days longer, no rain, a parched earth, a parched people. The Seine, its beauty, deteriorating until all they saw was a muddy wash of water around the city. Those who sought it for sustenance, the beggar in the street who bathed himself regularly, only turned to brackish water, nothing to sip, nothing to use to survive. And the famine, as it came, as it swept across the lands, as the baker who used to bake day after day, who would break his loaf and give it to the beggar day after day, had nothing for the people, had nothing for his family. what would they do in this parched land, in this land without hope, in this land with only a reminder of their pitiful life? As the lines which used to stretch around Notre Dame, which used to stretch across the Seine, grew smaller, fewer people collapsing in the street as they waited for their opportunity, fewer people there with hope that they could bring life to the city again. The cardinals, day after day, closing the giant oaken doors, day after day, deciding and thinking that this might be their last day, that it may be the last day that they close those doors of Notre Dame. As faith eroded, as belief in a future eroded, day after day, until the peak of summer, when life was at its bleakest, starvation across the land, horror in the city. And on that day, the Archbishop took those oaken doors and he swung them closed for the last time. Hope evaporated. The city all but dead in spirit. What were they to do? There was nothing that they could do. And so he turned his back to the doors and he walked away, his cardinals having gone weeks before, them having no hope. They went to their houses, they closed their shutters, they put their faces down, maybe for the last time. And so as he turned to walk away, one step, two step, he heard and he looks up and he thinks, what is that? He looks towards the cross, he looks to his left and right, empty pews, nothing there. But again, and he searches around. Where does that sound come from? He doesn't know what he's looking for. All he knows is he's searching for this. And finally, and he knows, he spots the source of the sound, and he turns back around towards those oaken doors, and he lifts up the massive wooden oak that's been put across them, and he creaks open the doors, and he looks around, he looks down the street across the Seine, and he sees nothing. He sees nothing but a man there in front of him, a man ravaged by disease, ravaged by the horrors of war, with no arms and no legs. And he says, but monsieur, how can I help you? And the man looks up at him and he said, it's not how you can help me, but it's how I can help you. And in confusion, he says, but how can you help me? He said, Monsieur, I am your bell ringer. I am here to replace the hunchback of Notre Dame. I am here to bring beauty back to your city, to bring joy back to your people, to bring hope to your future. And this archbishop scoffs and he almost turns away and he looks up and he feels a little inspiration of hope. And he says, well, maybe today, as I look at this ravaged individual, maybe today life is different. Maybe I place my hope in something that looks so hopeless. Maybe today life changes. And he calls from far and wide to his cardinals, one last time, one last moment of hope in a world full of horror, full of war, full of pestilence. And they come together and they gather and they offer to help the individual, this creature, climb the stairs. And the creature says no. He hops his way up, round, up to the top of the bell tower. He goes, he waits for the cardinals to assemble slowly behind him, for the archbishop to grant him his due. The archbishop picks up the hefty mallet and he gestures towards the man, and the man says, a simple shake of the head. And the archbishop, okay. He takes a step back. The cardinals all take a step back and let this man demonstrate what he has promised to them, what they, in a lot of ways, they have no belief, they have no faith, they have no hope. What could they possibly believe? And so as they watch and wait, he shuffles back, and they wait with bated breath. And after a moment, he takes a breath, and he shuffles and hurls himself at that gong, and through that sound, smashing into it with his face and skull, they hear the most sweet sound that they have ever heard, more beautiful than anything the hunchback could have ever provided them. That's a and across the land, that sound, that angelic sound, around and around it wound through and across the streets of Paris. They heard the sound that brought hope for the first time in months. Through the scorching heat, through the famine, it filled the starving bellies. It quieted the pained hearts and minds. That sound, so beautiful, across the streets of Paris, an uproar, a rising rabble. What was this? What was this sound, and where had it come from? Weeks had passed, months had passed without this. Where could it come from? Into the streets people poured, millions across the land heard this sound. Where did it come from? The man wobbled shakenly. A small drop of blood streaming down his face. And the archbishop was on his knees. How had this creature created such a beautiful sound? The cardinal's in shock, aghast. And the man confidently shuffles back and again shuffles forward and swings himself into that beautiful bell, that ton of copper, that ton of mass, creating such a beautiful sound. And again, the people of Paris rejoiced. The shouts, the yells, joyous across the streets. Oh my, how could this happen? How? And they knew where it came from, and they gathered en masse to surround Notre Dame. Some people pouring across the bridges, pouring into the Seine. Looking at this tower, the masses around it. The archbishop in shock, on his knees, speechless. But of course it was 3 p.m. And that meant one more ring. And so, as they held their breaths, the man shuffled back, this time with not one, but 2 drops of blood streaming down his face, wobbling ever so slightly. The bell still ringing and flowing gently. And he backed up and took one strong breath, preparing himself for the final act of beauty for the day. And as he shuffled forward, faster this time than ever before, careening towards that bell, he leaps and misses and careens over the ramparts, plummeting down to the ground, smashing himself against the cobblestones below. In shock, the archbishop, the cardinals have a moment to decide. What do? They race down and down and down. You hear the shouts, the screams of horror in the crowd below. Cardinals burst through the door. They gather around the men, shouldering their way through the crowds, looking at this mass of blood and gore. The horror. The archbishop gathers himself. He asks, how is this possible? Why now? Why, when there was so much beauty in the world? How could this have happened? Who was this man? Confusion tears, cries, yells from the crowd. Who was this man? Through it, you see someone approach the body. He kneels down towards it and he studies it closely. And he says, "But I'm a doctor." Let me think. And in sudden realization, he says, "Archbishop, I do not know who this man is, but his face rings a bell."
All right. Thank you. Not quite sure where we go from here, but so I'm rarely speechless, but thank you. Well done.